Hello, everybody. Welcome to the studio room, the breakout session. I give you Misty.
So, good morning. Thank you for joining my session today. And thank you for all trying to, since there's just a small number of us, to get close together. And we're going to have some intimate conversations. And just so you know, I speak quite often, but I normally don't use a mic because I am very loud. And so if I become loud, just give me a signal. I don't know what the signal can be. It could be, it could be that. So, welcome to Illuminations Breaking Barriers. And what an honor it is to be at the inaugural session, the very first one. And I have no doubt that as this team of people who have put this together continue to build upon the work, that it will be illuminating the barriers that children are facing for years to come, but illuminating those so that we can break them down. And that is what we're here for today. So before we get into this, you're probably wondering, who is this lady anyway? I've never heard of her. Well, I'm actually an educator like most of you here today, but I'm not from Mississippi. I'm actually from the neighboring state of Alabama, but I actually have family here, and I actually am friends with Lita and was able to meet her through our common love of this worthy work. And so it's such a pleasure to be here and supporting this work in the state of Mississippi that she is doing now. So I am an educator, but that is not my first career. We were just joking about that. My first career was graphic designer. And you're thinking, how in the world did you end up speaking to us? Well, I'm about to tell you how. So that this is my second career. I'm actually been in education less than 15 years. So I'm almost anybody else around year 15? We're baby teachers. We're baby teachers. So around age year 15. So I began my educational career, though, everybody hold your breath, in seventh grade math. That's a whole nother level of, I don't even want to talk about it right now. But I needed a job, right? And that's what was open. So I've done seventh grade math for a few months because I graduated in like December. So I did seventh grade math. That's called boot camp for teachers, in case anybody wants to know. And then I taught fifth grade ELA, fourth grade ELA. I was a local reading specialist at the building level, a regional literacy specialist in the state of Alabama, and now I'm a state level specialist for the Alabama State Department of Education. So it's an honor to be with you here today. All right. So, dyslexia, dreams, and at the end, I have three boys. The oldest two are educators, teaches social studies and special ed, and one teaches agri-science. And this is my third son. And you said earlier the third one was for entertainment purposes only. Like, I thought you were talking about Nathan. All right. So this is my third son. So a little bit about him. At the end of kindergarten, remember this is my third son. So at the end of kindergarten, anybody have children and you go to the parent meeting, and this is what was said. He doesn't know all of his letter sounds, but he is so smart. He is going to be just fine. And remember, this is my second career. So do you know what I said? Okay. At the end of first grade, guess what? He's still struggling to blend, but he is so smart, Misty. He is going to be just fine. Okay. At the end of second grade, guess what? Same thing. By the end of second grade, now my older sons, they've progressed through their academic journey quite well, and I had no issues. But at the end of second grade, I'm a semi-intelligent person, I thought, and I'm like, something's not right. And so at the end of second grade, when I get that, the words that came out of my mouth were not okay. They were also not probably pleasant, but it was like, I need to know what's going on. I need to know what's going on. So I want to take you back. This was back in 2010, 2011, way before Mississippi enacted their literacy legislation and way before Alabama also followed suit with the Alabama Literacy Act. I want you to also know that this is before the words dyslexia were even written into our state code because it wasn't real, right? I want you to know this little boy's not lazy. It's not because he didn't want to, it's because it's real. And so from that, I want you to meet this little boy. You going to play that for us?
Imagine what it would be like if each time you looked at a page, everything moved. Imagine each time you looked at a D, it became a B, or a B became a D. Imagine you are a fifth grader who can do middle school math, but can still only read on a second grade level. If you can imagine these things, you can imagine what it would be like to be dyslexic. Dyslexia is a language learning disability. Dyslexics have trouble with language skills like spelling and reading, or sometimes math. Dyslexia can make it hard to make good grades in school. No matter how smart you know you are, dyslexia can still make you feel dumb. No one has been able to figure out what causes dyslexia. Studies have shown dyslexics' brains develop differently. It even works differently than other people's brains. Can you believe 15% of the world has dyslexia? Some people don't even know they have it. They just think they're dumb and that they can't read. The truth is, dyslexic people are really gifted in other things, like computer science, design, acting, math, or music. You might know a few of these famous dyslexic people. Steven Spielberg, director of E.T. and Indiana Jones. Steve Jobs, the co-sponsor of Apple. And the most famous of all, Albert Einstein. He was one of history's greatest minds. His math and science theories changed the world. Some signs of dyslexia are problems learning to speak, problems learning letters, problems spelling and reading, or sometimes following math steps. Dyslexia is a lifelong condition. You can't fix a dyslexic person. A dyslexic person just has to learn to deal with their problem. They learn differently, so they need to be taught differently. Some dyslexic students need one-on-one help in school. Schools do not recognize dyslexia as a learning disability. This sometimes makes it hard for dyslexics to make good grades in school. Right now, the United States Congress is trying to fix that with H.R. 456. Alabama Congressman Spencer Baucus is a co-sponsor of this bill. Patricia Polacco wrote a book called Thanking Mr. Fokker. It was about her struggle with dyslexia. Mr. Fokker was the teacher who helped her succeed. In her book, she wrote, "All children have gifts. Some open them at different times." Readers around the world are glad that Mr. Fokker helped that dyslexic open her gifts. Welcome to my life. I am Nathan Wilson. I am dyslexic. I have gifts, and I am just trying to open them.
Let's see if we can. So you can tell that everything in his video was not quite accurate because it was a long time ago. But this is my son, and he is one of the 1 in 5. And so, yes, that video is very old, and everything about the research and everything that he shares is not accurate because we know so much more now than we did then. But I always share it because you need to see his voice, hear his voice, see his face to understand the struggle. So, as I mentioned, this was before Mississippi's Literacy Act, Alabama's Literacy Act, before dyslexia was written into code. He struggled. At the end of 2nd grade, that's when, with the help of a local reading specialist who was trying everything she could to help him, but she didn't know what to do. She's to this day one of my very best friends. We took him at that point to Scottish Rite and had the actual diagnosis. And that's where the journey actually began. That journey is one of resilience and determination. And that's the story I want to share with you today. So that resilience and determination really hit hard the very next year. Because as a mom, as an advocate, what do you think I had to fight for? Everything. Everything at that point. I had to fight for him to get any accommodations. I had to fight for him to get assistive technology. So back it up to 2010, 2011. What kind of technology was there? He had do you guys remember the iPods that were actually like this big? So he had an iPod that had the app that he could access his textbooks on. I don't even remember the name of it, but he wore it almost like a necklace around his neck, and he carried that to school every day. So how do you think that went over with other kids? Not well. Why does he get to do that? Why does he get to do that? Why does he get extra time? All of those things. I also had to fight this, you don't want him identified. Don't put a label on him. Yes, I do want him identified. Yes, I do want a label on him because this is who he is. And so we went through all of that fight, right? In the process of that, I want to go back. Luckily, some miracle sent to me a certified academic language therapist. Anybody in here a certified academic language therapist? I am in rural Alabama, and out of nowhere, out of the heavens, opens up this lady who comes to work at his school district, but in 5th grade. Let's count it. Kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th. 6 years of his academic career waiting on an angel. You're an angel for somebody. So in that time, though, we did what we knew to do. But the language therapy that he received, it was that language therapy that gave him a love of linguistics, the puzzle of the English language. And learning to unlock that puzzle also meant he began to unlock his potential. So thank you. But also something else happened. Because he kept getting asked, why do you have this and why do you get to do that? He began to do this. He did this speech as a 5th grader. Anybody know 4-H, right? Well, 4-H speech contest. Well, guess what he discovered he could do really well? Public speaking. So in the 5th grade, he began to advocate for himself and for others who were just like him. Let's see if we can go to the next slide. All right. So from 5th grade, now we were in rural Alabama. Anybody know what a unit school is? That's a K through 12 school. That's a tiny school of about 700 kids. So in the process of that, 2010, 2011, I went back and got my education degree in 2012. Why do you think I got my education degree? No parent should ever go what I went through, and no child should ever go what my son went through. And so his dreams, his dyslexia and his dreams have become my determination. And I'm going to share with you a little bit about that in just a second. But about 10th grade, right before his 10th grade year, I was recruited. By that time, I was a local specialist. I was recruited to move to a larger district and do the work in that larger district. So he went from a class of about 50 people to about 350. So he went from being, big boy on campus, everybody knows me, to being no one. But in that, he continued to speak and to advocate throughout his high school career, all the way to becoming, I don't know if you're familiar with FCCLA, family. He was a state officer and a national officer candidate. And from that time, from 5th grade until senior year, dyslexia was his platform. And every year, he would tell more and more people what it's like to be a dyslexic student. He's been from sea to shining sea, coast to coast, telling people dyslexia is real. This is what it feels like, and I have gifts, and I'm going to open them. So he continues his advocacy. So fast forward, we moved from that small rural district to the larger district near Huntsville, Alabama. Everybody knows NASA, right? So we're near there, and luck would have it, this little boy got an opportunity to discover his voice in musical theater. Now, I need to tell you guys the story because you're about to laugh. We go to this large district. He comes home one day and he says, "Hey, Mom, I'm going to audition." And I said, "For what?" And he said, "For You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown." And I was like, okay. I thought, okay. So he calls and he said, "Hey, I got a part." And I was like, okay. I said, "What'd you get?" "Linus." I said, "What?" He got a lead role. Linus, the first time ever. God, I'd never heard him sing. I'd never seen him on stage. None of that. So we go, the elementary school goes to the high school. You get to watch the performance. And my administrators are looking at me like, "Why didn't you tell us?" And I was like, "I didn't know. I had no idea." So he's up there with this blanket and he's singing and he's doing all that, So he was able to find his voice in theater. So fast forward, he graduates from there, and he had given up all of his accommodations, his IEP, everything as a sophomore in high school. He came to me and said, "I don't feel like I need it anymore, Mom." Ooh, that was a hard thing, right? And I said, okay. That also tells you about what high quality instruction he was experiencing, high quality. And he said, "I don't need any more." I said, okay. Well, fast forward, he graduates. He goes 2 years community college. Thank goodness for community college, right? But then goes to university. And the first semester, he says, "I think I need some accommodations." And I said, okay. And he said, because he was taking Spanish. And guess what? They expect you to spell those words correctly. He said, "I think I need some accommodations." I said, okay. I said, "Well, let me see what we need to do. I'll call." And he said, no. I've already been over there." I said, "Excuse me?" He said, "I've already been to student services. This is what I need. Da, 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 da." He said, "I need my IEP or my diagnosis." Well, we've moved about 10 times since that diagnosis, and his IEP is no good anymore. So I happened to be having lunch because at this time I'm working at the state level with that same local reading specialist that he had in 2nd grade. And I'm sharing with her the story. And she says, "Did you ever email that diagnosis to me?" And I said, "Yeah, I think I did." And she said, "I still have access to my school email. Let's go look." And you guys, it was still in her email. So he takes it to the university, he gets the accommodations he needs. And while at university, he also majors in theater. This is that same little boy in cabaret, on stage using his gifts and talents in a way that I could never do. But that same little boy who struggled to read, that same little boy who had to wear something around his neck, that same little boy who tried to tell the world that dyslexia is real, graduated with honors, right? Every child deserves to dream, but our role is to help them develop determination. It's one thing to have a dream, but you've got to have some moxie, some guts when you face barriers. And we have to give them the determination to break down those barriers. So, a little bit about where he is now. By the way, this was May of last year. In May of last year, he graduated with honors from university, and 4 days later was offered a job near Boston to work at the North Shore Musical Theater, only about an hour away from his dream of Broadway. Now, I don't know about you, but I know a little boy who's determined. And I bet you that in just a few years from now, when Lita has me back, I can say, he's on Broadway, right? Because there's something magical that happens when someone has to face those barriers and break them down. They learn to break down barriers everywhere they go and build a pathway that others will follow. And I believe that is what he will continue to do. Every child deserves to dream, but they need to know the skills to develop determination too. So that determination now becomes my determination. Remember, I told you that this is my second career, wasn't even a teacher. And I never saw myself really as a teacher, and certainly not as a literacy specialist, and certainly not as a state specialist. But now I get to do this work. And so I want to tell you a little bit about how my son's journey has inspired this work right here. We are focusing a lot today about those older struggling readers and how we prepare skilled adolescent readers, especially those who are dyslexic. But our work, as my friends mentioned this morning, is really not just about dyslexic readers. It's about supporting all striving readers to attain literacy excellence. So my work is actually based on the work of these two people right here and the work that they have done and poured in to me, which I'm extremely thankful for. So the work in right now that I get to do is based on their research, but also some personal experiences with my own son. So I want to talk to you about that first tenet of my work. The little magnifying glass up there is about actionable assessment. So assessment is a very important part of our work with dyslexic students, right? That universal screening process helps us to identify some students who might be at risk. But that's just the beginning phase of this. The reason that I start with actionable assessments is because I believe that assessment should be two things. It should be accountable and it should be actionable. Now, most educators, when I say the word accountable, what does it feel like? That's not what I mean. It should be an account of student learning or an account of student skill. But it should also be actionable. It should tell us where to go in order to get that student where they need to be. So that set of numbers that we get from an assessment really is just to build us a map to get a student to where it needs to be. So accountable, and actionable. So my work is supporting teachers through using assessment data to truly drill down to specific deficits and start to close gaps. But what I know about adolescent learners, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, is many of those educators are not skilled at looking at assessment data in that way. Do you guys find that in your work? So this is also what I know, is that we have to educate every teacher in our nation to be data literate and to not be afraid of it, because it's not about accountability of the teacher as much as it is we need to know where the kid is and how to get them to the next place. If we want our educators to use the data in the right way, then we have to create a data culture, and that's part of that work. But the next one right here, the little book and the fingers, is the fluency factor. I wanted to name this module the fear factor. They wouldn't let me. This is why I wanted to name it the fear factor. When I talk to fifth, sixth, seventh grade teachers about the word fluency, what do? It's fearful, it's scared. Why? What do they think about fluency?
Make us feel very accountable for the child's behavior, even though we can't control it, and all we can do is continue to hope that we can get through. So that's fearful.
It's fearful. And this is what I also think scares them about fluency. So I'll share with you a story, and it'll probably shed some light on it. When I first stepped out of the fifth grade classroom to be a K-3 specialist, I had to do assessments, right? So when I went, and there's little Lori, and she's sitting in front of me, and I said, okay, baby, I'm going to set my timers at 1 minute, and you're just going to read this passage for me. Now, remember, I was a fifth grade teacher. Now I'm in a K-3. And little Lori goes, and I said, what are you doing? So why was she doing that? She was about to as fast as she could. So when I speak to fifth, sixth, seventh grade teachers, they're fearful because that's what they think. They think that about fluency because in the past, in our nation, we have used that measure inappropriately at times. And true fluency is not rate. And we know that in this room. But this module also helps us to understand that fluency is that bridge to understanding, it's the bridge to comprehension, but it's the gatekeeper to learning. It's the gatekeeper to learning in all content areas. It's the gatekeeper. And since it's like October, I kind of see it as like the gatekeeper, really scary, right? But it is. It's the gatekeeper. And we have to reframe the word fluency to an understanding that it is fluent reading, fluent speaking, and fluent writing. It is all of those things because it is the gatekeeper to learning. We also have to reframe for our adolescent learners, for our educators, that fluency is not a reading skill. Fluency is a learning skill. They cannot comprehend complex science, social studies text if they are not fluent. It is very difficult. My friend Kevin said earlier, if they know the words and they know the vocabulary, then we can get to doing all that other things. They're not magic, but they're the tricks of comprehension. But guys, if they're not there, if they're not accurate, automatic, and fluent, it puts up another barrier. It puts up another barrier. So we've got actionable assessments, changing the way we see and use assessment, especially for upper elementary and middle school, and then reframing fluency as the gatekeeper to learning. And then that next piece, which Kevin and Lori spoke about this morning, is advanced word study. Now, why do you think I call it advanced word study for middle school, upper elementary and middle school? Y'all know. Because if I said phonics, what would they do? They were, she said they were freaked out. right? So, just like what Lori did this morning, that vocabulary activity. So, the advanced word study part of our work now is one thing that I learned from Kevin and Lori, but I watched it happen with my son. Remember, I told you that he fell in love with linguistics because of the certified academic language therapist? Because it became the puzzle. And he unlocked that puzzle. Well, when we approach this portion, advanced word study, as such, and that puzzle, guess what these brilliant dyslexic minds love? They love the etymology, they love the morphology because it's a code for them. And they are good at coding. You guys ever noticed? Like they can unlock that code. So when we approach advanced word study with these students, giving them the tools that they need to break down multisyllabic words. Listen, I joke. I say that kid's going out to intervention and they're getting CAT, aren't they? But fifth grade teacher, you're supposed to be teaching catastrophic, not cat. How do you do that? Big word strategy. We teach students to break down those multisyllabic words. We give them the tools they need to succeed. And when we do that, we also give them the tools and the independence they need to begin to be those word collectors. Everybody loves that book, right? Everybody loves the word collector book. But they need tools to become a word collector. If they're going to unlock that puzzle of language, they need tools, which comes in with this advanced word study. So just like Kevin and Lori kind of touched on this morning, it's a very important piece of the work in developing adolescent literacy, but very much so with dyslexic students because they need to know how to break down that word and use those tools to develop meaning. And when they develop meaning, guess what that plays right into? Comprehension, which is the last thing, content comprehension. Okay? So I want to let that sit there for a second because Kevin and Lori already touched on this morning. As we move throughout our academic career, we are expected to be able to interact with more and more complexity. Every level of our academic career, think about your own. Some of you are still, right? We're always learning. That level of complexity increases every year. It also increases in science and social studies at a rate, I mean, it's unreal. So I want to tell you a little bit about that before I get into that, about the science, social studies, and other things. Remember I mentioned that 2 of my sons are high school teachers? So the son that teaches history, he had been a teacher for about a year. And I'm not going to lie to you guys. He said, hey, these kids can't read a primary source. And this is what he said. What y'all doing down there? Right? My son who teaches agri-science said, hey, these kids can't convert fractions. What y'all doing down there? So they have a valid point, don't they? But even in their 2 content areas, this is essential. Students are expected to be independent with the text. Now, they're going to employ the tricks that Kevin showed us, right? Like they employ all those tricks, but they still have to have a level of independence with the text. Also, think about once you move through and take AP History, AP Lang, all of those things. I'm not saying every kid has to take that, but I want them to be able to, right? So this portion is about content comprehension and those strategies that Kevin mentioned this morning, how to build in structures in a classroom that lead students to deeper levels of comprehension, deeper levels of critical thinking, and deeper levels of articulation of thoughts and ideas. Because here's what I know. We have to build a society of thinkers. We need to build a citizenship of people who ask questions, justify their thoughts and ideas, and articulate those things in writing. Because here's what I know: reading should stir the mind, but writing should stir the world. And that's what we want to develop in our students. Students who can read, analyze, interpret, and apply their learning in different ways. Whether it be, I always joke, whether it be that they're at the Golden Room of the White House or the Golden Arches, I need for you to look me in the eye because I want my fries right, right? So in this part of the work, it's about that deeper level of thinking through those annotations or coding of the text, like my friends mentioned this morning, and very importantly, deep levels of academic discourse that guides their thinking, leads them to deeper levels of thinking, but builds upon one another's vocabulary and one another's background knowledge. So all of these pieces are part of my determination. And my determination, because I had a dyslexic son who had some big dreams. How many of you know? I bet you're all here because you know a dyslexic, right? Wrong question for this crowd. But I want you to think about those dyslexic children that you know and the potential that they have. I kept looking at that little boy with those blue eyes who was full of potential. But also, every time he tried to take another path, there was another barrier, and another barrier. My determination in this work is we break all the barriers, but not just for dyslexic students. We'll talk about that in just a few minutes. So two things to go over. Attainment, achievement, and acceleration. How many of you grew up watching the AAA commercials, right? And it's like AAA, we've got more, and travel and all that. And I always like, what are they talking about? The travel agent commercials. By the way, I was really thankful for AAA when Nathan moved to Boston, because week 1, guess where he was? On the interstate at midnight. And guys, I'm in Alabama asleep, and I wake up to this text the next morning. Are y'all ready for this? Well, I guess you'd like to know I made it home okay. Friends, I said, where were you? I mean, I was asleep, and he said, well, I was broke down last night on the interstate. Anyway, it was the whole thing, but thankful for AAA. But don't you love that text? Just so you know, I made it home okay. Okay. All right. Attainment, achievement, acceleration. These are my AAAs. And this is what I want you to know. I feel like this is important for us in our work. Okay, so let's talk about attainment. Where we are in the state of Mississippi and in my home state of Alabama, we have a pathway to promotion, right, Mississippi? It's a cut score. I don't know where yours is at right now. I can't remember. But I have a cut score too. That's a third grader's first path to promotion. And I guess you guys could talk a whole lot about that. Mississippi, your cut score has grown over time. You've increased it, right? Ours just increased. We will follow suit. We will slowly increase that. But I want you to think back to the very beginning, that word attainment. When we first started that work, a lot of students were promoted to 4th grade. Did they have 4th grade skills yet? No. Because what they had and what they have right now with our cut score is literacy attainment. Just right there. Have you ever seen like a kid when they're learning to swim and they hang on to the edge of the pool and they just hang there like that with their little fingernails? That's how I think about attainment, that first level, like I've made it right here. And that is so important because we need to know the steps that they're taking to get to solid skills, right? But for a lot of our students, they're still at this level, this attainment, this barely attainment of foundational skills. And that's important. I see some of you shaking your head because you've been there, and that's so important. So literacy attainment is the first thing, and that should be for all students. All students should have those basic foundational skills. And what do we know about research? I mean, there's a pretty famous number, something like 95%, something like that, of students who can read at least at that sufficient level. So literacy attainment. So what about those students who then leave third grade and go to fourth grade, who are not quite there? We still have a responsibility to fill those gaps so that they reach that level of attainment. What do you know about illiteracy? Think about if a child or a human, we're the only ones that read, does not have basic literacy skills. Think of all the things that inhibits. What's one thing it might inhibit? Math all day long. We have a mathematics law in our state called the Numeracy Act. My niece is actually a regional mathematics coordinator, and we partner all the time because she's like, if they can't read the math problem, they can't solve it, right? So mathematics. What else, though, as an adult, if you're illiterate, what might that inhibit? Self-esteem, employment, job. Can't go to a restaurant. Nathan still struggles with that, by the way. What else? Healthcare. Think about reading a medication, like when I'm supposed to take my medication. I have a pretty not famous, but I have a story I tell all the time. It's pretty famous in my state that Nathan was about to turn 16, and we were heading to Huntsville down the interstate. And guys, if you've ever been to Huntsville, it is growing so fast that, like, strap in because it's going to be moving fast. We're going down the interstate, and he keeps saying, "Why don't you move over?" And I said, "Well, son, the signs say that lane is ending." And he said, "I couldn't read it." We're driving so fast that he can't process the language on the sign. And I was about to put him in a car and put him on the road. Think about that for a second. But it's okay, South. He's in the Northeast now. It's okay. He's driving in Boston. But think about that. That's a very simplistic thing, right? But it's real. My friend said, yes, it is. Have you experienced that with someone? Right. A lot of times we have these conversations and we stick to in the school environment. But I want to tell you, if there's not attainment, think of all the things we just discussed that it inhibits. Medication's a big one. My mother, it's not her illiteracy, but it's her age now, but trying to figure out what medicine she's supposed to take, and she wants to look at the colors. I'm like, oh, baby, they change colors, right? But driving down the road is a big one. Filling out a job application. When he went to get an apartment in Massachusetts, and I was like, you're going to have to send me the lease because I need to read it, right? So literacy attainment. We must have that attainment, but that's not enough. So the next A is achievement. Once they have that level of attainment, what are we doing to prepare educators beyond the K-3 world to make sure that literacy achievement is sustained? Because what happens when a student leaves the K-3 world and enters into an environment where we don't have an educator who's highly trained in effective practice? What does research say can happen? Quickly, right? We all talk about the impact of a highly qualified teacher, but what about when there's not? And that child who is just barely at levels of attainment is put into an environment where there are no evidence-based practices in place and no training in the science of reading, which, by the way, is not a paradigm shift, right? It's just a return to common sense and a return to research, evidence-based. Some people in the room have been doing it a long time. So think about that, attainment and achievement. How do we go from just attainment to achievement and sustained practices? So that's another part of dyslexia, dreams, now becomes my determination, is that we go from just attainment to literacy achievement with sustained evidence-based practices. But the last one's probably the most important to me, and that's acceleration. Listen, it's not enough to have attainment and achievement, because there's a whole group of kids, growth for every student. And when I say acceleration, I also mean high flyers. The goal should be that every student fulfill their maximum potential. So my oldest son, if you want to take it to there, was gifted and talented, bored out of his mind in a classroom. Doesn't he also deserve equitable opportunities for growth? Yeah, he does. That comes through that training of highly qualified teachers with evidence-based practices, knowing how to differentiate, because Kevin and I had a breakfast conversation. He didn't even know that I was going to bring that up today. Knowing how to differentiate to meet the needs of all students so that we accelerate the growth of every student. Our special ed students, our striving readers, our gifted and talented, attainment, achievement, acceleration. So when I say this often, sometimes I get some people go, ooh, because I'll say, teach to the top. And I actually had someone leave a presentation when I said that one time, and my heart just broke because she didn't wait to let me finish. And when I say teach to the top, I don't mean ignore struggling readers. I mean this, heart and high expectations. We must have a heart to meet the needs of all students, but here's what we are missing, and I'm not just talking about Mississippi, Alabama, I'm talking about our nation, is that high expectations. The expectation that we are building critical thinkers, students who can articulate their thoughts and ideas. They are brilliant. Listen, they can do things we cannot do. All right? And what I want to propose to you today is that oftentimes we'll go, these kids today. Anybody in here ever do that? These kids today. They said the same thing about you, by the way. They did. Children are different, but there are things that they can do that you did not do, you cannot do, and you will never be able to do. Because I also want to propose this to you. The reason why we need attainment, achievement, and acceleration is we are raising global citizens. And we are raising my son, for instance. You know, he didn't move across the pond, but he might. We are raising global citizens who must live, survive, and thrive in a new global market. I don't need to take you to the research on where we are globally in education, right? I don't want to even go there today. I don't want to pose the problem. I want to pose the solution. The solution is heart and high expectations. We must have both. My friend here, her and her husband, y'all tag team both of those things, don't you? Attainment, achievement, acceleration. Attainment, achievement, and acceleration. Those three things, because of a dyslexic and some big dreams, now become my determinations. So I want to talk to you about the very last thing, and I say this everywhere I go. I go all the way back to actionable assessments and the word data, because my role is two parts. My first role is data analytics and assessment support K-5 literacy. So you can bet I'm just not real popular sometimes, right? Data analytics and assessment. And then the other piece is beyond grade 3. But I go back to that data piece because data is not just data. Every number has a face. Remember the little face on the screen at the very beginning? Every piece of data has a future. And what I want to propose to you is that every face deserves a literate future. Today, I hope that my son's story has inspired you to help other dyslexics dream big. But more than that, there's something here for us as educators. Those dyslexics have dreams, but we are the ones that have to give them the determination. They're not going to do it on their own because it is overwhelming. You could probably just even hear it in his voice as a little fifth grader, right? Last October, Dyslexia Awareness Month, I work for a state agency, as I told you earlier. 100 of our staff members gathered at my son's university for a meeting. They didn't know he was going to be their surprise guest. So at lunch, he came to speak to them, and he shared with them a little bit about his story and how he got to where he was and what had worked for him as a dyslexic and what did not work, like colored overlays. All the things we tried, right? After he finished, he gave a Q&A time. And one of my friends said, "Hey, Nathan, if you could go back and talk to that fifth grader self, what would you say?" I had no idea she was going to ask him that. And he was like, "That's a good question." And he took a minute, and I'd never seen him do this. And he took a minute, he was very thoughtful, and he said, "It's okay to be different. You're different, and it's okay to be different." And so then another person asked him, "How did you learn to advocate for yourself?" And he said, "Honestly, it was my mom. She told me I had to, but she taught me how to." And so, if you take nothing else away from this today, I want you to take away this. You've got to give them the determination. And if you're a teacher, which a lot of you are, you give them that every day. Keep giving it to them. If you're a certified academic language therapist in this room, I'm going to say it one more time. You are an angel. And from the bottom of my heart and from my son, thank you very much. And to Lita, I want to thank Lita for inviting me here today. And thank you all for choosing to attend this session. I don't want us to leave quite yet until we know that Miss Linda is done. But that's it.
Yes, please thank you, Misty, for coming and joining us, and great round of applause for our crowd here and for Misty.